Well, let's start with a puzzle. How do you really compare wealth between, say, Denmark and India? Now, you might think the obvious answer is to just convert their currencies to dollars. Easy, right? Well, it turns out the real answer is way more interesting, because what your money can actually buy, that's what truly matters.
So, get this. If you just look at the standard GDP per person, the average Dane seems to be 27 times wealthier than the average Indian. 27 times. I mean, that is a staggering gap. But you have to ask yourself, does that number really capture what it's like to live and, pay for things in Copenhagen versus Chennai?
And this is where it all gets kind of wild. The numbers on the left, that's our 27-to-1 gap. But when we adjust for something called purchasing power parity, or PPP, the whole picture changes. The gap shrinks all the way down to just 6.5-to-1. Denmark's number actually goes down, while India's more than triples. So what in the world is going on here?
Okay, to figure this out, we have to talk about a pretty big problem. The exchange rates you see on the news, the ones that gave us that crazy 27x figure, well, they can lie. They're fantastic for international business, sure, but they can be super misleading when you're trying to figure out the actual cost of living.
You see, market exchange rates are all about international trade and investment. They're moved around by big financial forces like interest rates and speculation. And that's why they're great at telling you the price of things that get shipped around the globe, like cars or microchips. But they tell you almost nothing about the price of local stuff. So if the market rates are kind of the wrong tool for the job, what's the alternative? We need a much better way to measure what your money can actually buy. We need a tool that just ignores all the noise of the currency markets and focuses directly on the cost of living.
And the big idea behind this new tool starts with a simple economic theory, the law of one price. Now, let's be clear, this is a perfect world scenario, not reality. But the theory is this. In a world with no barriers, an identical product should cost the exact same everywhere, once you do the currency conversion.
But of course, we don't live in that perfect world, and we buy a lot more than just one thing. So economists came up with a practical solution. They created a massive standardized basket of goods and services. We are talking about 3,000 common items here. Everything from bread and milk to rent and even healthcare. Then they go and measure the cost of that entire basket in countries all over the world.
And that brings us to the formal definition right here. Purchasing power parity is that special, theoretical exchange rate that would make that giant basket of goods cost the exact same amount in any two countries. So it's not a rate you'll ever find at a currency exchange booth. It's a powerful economic tool for comparing what people can actually afford.
So what happens when we apply this tool? Well, it does way more than just tweak numbers for a few countries. It fundamentally repaints our entire picture of the global economy, changing how we understand who the biggest players really are.
Just take a look at what this does for our perception of China's economy. Using the standard market rates, the US economy looked much, much larger for years. But when you adjust for PPP, the story completely flips. Because local goods and services are so much cheaper in China, the actual purchasing power of their economy is massive. In fact, by this measure, China's economy actually became the world's largest several years ago.
Now, this doesn't mean PPP is the only thing that matters. The IMF makes a really important point here. If you want to measure a country's global financial clout, its power in international trade, then yeah, market rates are more relevant. So, here's a simple way to think about it. PPP is for comparing standards of living, while market rates are for measuring global economic influence.
As you can probably imagine, pricing a 3,000-item basket of goods is it's a monumental task. So to make this whole concept a lot easier to digest, The Economist magazine created a brilliant and honestly kind of fun shortcut known as the Big Mac method.
Yep, welcome to the world of Burgonomics. The idea is just so simple. The Big Mac is sold in over 100 countries, and it's pretty much the same everywhere you go. But to make it, you need a whole bunch of local costs: beef, buns, labor, rent, advertising. So it ends up being a surprisingly effective mini basket of goods, all wrapped up in a sesame seed bun.
Okay, so here's how it works in practice. In this example, a Big Mac cost $5.58 in the US and 20 Hong Kong dollars in Hong Kong. If you just divide the two prices, you get an implied exchange rate of about 3.6 Hong Kong dollars to $1 US. But look at the actual market rate at the time.
So, that massive gap between the burger-based rate and the market rate led The Economist to a really simple conclusion. The Hong Kong dollar was 54.2% undervalued compared to the US dollar. To put it simply, your American dollar could buy you a lot more Big Macs in Hong Kong.
But obviously, we can't base all of economics on burgers. The Big Mac Index has its limits, and you know what? So does the more official PPP calculation. It's an incredibly powerful tool, but to use it wisely, we have to understand its flaws.
Right, so there are some big challenges. For starters, tastes are different everywhere. A standard shopping list in Japan is not going to be the same as one in Mexico. Then there's the quality issue, which is really hard to measure. A car in one country might be totally different from a car in another. And you also have to think about things that just can't be traded, like haircuts or doctor's visits. These non-tradables are often way cheaper in developing countries, which is a huge reason their PPP numbers get such a big boost. And finally, you've got stuff like taxes and trade barriers that can mess with the prices of even identical goods.
So at the end of the day, is purchasing power parity a perfect tool? No, of course not. It's messy, it's complex, it's full of compromises. But it corrects a massive distortion at the very heart of how we see the world. It reminds us that a country's wealth isn't just some number in a bank account, but what its people can actually afford day to day. It's not the whole truth, but it pushes us a lot closer. And maybe that's the most important question to leave you with. If we ignore what money can actually buy, are we truly seeing the world as it is?